And welcome back again. Yours truly, Anthony Parker Alexander of Keeping It Honest. We don't just keep it real, we don't just keep it simple, we keep it honest. You're seeing the flags right here. So, what we have coming up is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He's going to have a special announcement coming up in a couple minutes. Is he going to stay in the race? Is he going to bow out? We'll all find out in a couple minutes. Have any questions or comments, you can email yours truly, parkerman2011 at gmail.com, parkerman2011 at gmail.com. You can text me. Phone number is 216-702-3718, 216-702-3718. I would like to thank you guys for supporting our show. If you'd like to go to our Patreon page, it's kind of like a PPS, a fundraiser. You get on there, and there's three different tiers that you can go to, and you can pick whichever tier that you want to contribute for our show. We appreciate it. We do long shows as long as 5.5 hours. We do short shows or clips or shorts as long as or as short as 5 seconds. We talk anything and everything. We talk politics, entertainment, human interest stories. We try to put things in a Parker twist. So today, coming up, RFK Jr. is going to speak. Some are saying he's going to drop out and endorse Donald Trump. Some say that if he does endorse Donald Trump, that Donald Trump's going to give him a position in his cabinet. He's not going back to the Democratic Party. We all know that. His VP candidate, she said pretty much that since they have been running, that the Democratic Party has been trying to kick them out. They've been doing some underhanded stuff. She did an interview on a podcast, and it was about an hour, but she talked about the ins and outs of politics. And I can tell you, for running for Congress, that there are deals that are made behind closed doors. So when you think about conspiracies, not everything is a conspiracy, but there are some things that aren't. So did anybody watch the Democratic National Convention? We covered it all the 4 days. Our longest coverage was 5.5 hours. Our shortest one was 3 hours. If you're undecided, and if you're undecided, you're probably going to watch, excuse me, this press conference with Robert F. Kennedy. If he decides to drop out, are you going to follow him where he goes? Some people are saying the reason they want him to drop out is because with the undecided voters, the independents, that they're taking away the Donald Trump voters and may give Kamala Harris a better chance of winning. So what do you say? Let me know. And one thing I do like is that when you guys do respond to me, you respond and I check it out via the phone. We do our community threads. I have people respond to a lot of the videos that I put up, so keep it coming. And remember, hit the like button, hit the share button, and of course, subscribe. So what do you think? Who do you think is going to win this race? Do you think it's going to be Donald Trump, or you think it's going to be Kamala Harris? It seems like the country's kind of divided, almost 50% apiece as far as who they want. And depending on who you want will decide how the rest of this world will be. Donald Trump's, of course, his promotional thing is Make America Great Again. And Kamala Harris, she's saying, we won't go back. And as far as the independents, you have Dr. Cornel West, who's still in it, Robert F. Kennedy right now, who's still in it, Jill Stein, who's still in it, and a bunch of other people. How many of you out there are going to the independent side? I always say, pick your heart. Donald Trump says, pick your stomach. Are you more hungry today than you were 4 years ago? Are gas prices high? Is rent high? Is food high? Is school high? Only thing that's not high is your wages. So how much of this affects you? Are you going to pick a president who you think is going to get you to the promised land, or are you going to pick a president that won't? How many people feel that Kamala Harris wasn't picked by the American people? This day and time, as that convention ended yesterday, was this supposed to be Joe Biden's convention? You saw all the people. They brought out Bill Clinton, brought out Hillary Clinton, they brought out Barack Obama, they brought out Michelle Obama. They had the backdrop of Beyonce's music. And speaking of Beyonce, just how the media works, at the last minute they said she was going to appear, so everybody was kind of waiting. And I guess they got it wrong. I think it was TMC that said they were going to, or that Beyonce was going to appear, and she didn't. So, don't believe everything that you hear. Use our shows as Cliff Notes, because what we do is we give you the information. And at the end of the day, you may not like everything what we gave you, but at least, hopefully, you'll respect that we gave you the truth. And then check it out yourself. So they said that this was going to be coming up at 2 o'clock. So I'm going to check and see where we're at. I guess now he won't be talking till another half hour. So what we're going to do is we're going to piggyback on another site real quick. And I like this one site. This was a pretty good site. It's called Agenda TV. And on this person's site, all he does is cover news. And he does such a good job at it that we're going to see if we can piggyback and get on his site. You're watching Keeping It Honest, and that's what we do. Yours truly, Anthony Parker Alexander. And we came ready to do the show. That's why we don't really have any notes in front of us. We were just going to go straight into the show and let you see it. But now we're going to piggyback on this guy, and his station is called Agenda Free TV. And as you can tell, he's got a ticker, so it's saying we're going to have another at least 29 minutes. So we're going to see what we can see, and we're going to listen in and see what he's doing on his show, and we're going to interject when we can. Our phone number for voice messages is 216-702-3718, 216-702-3718. We thank you for letting us do all of the convention shows. They were a lot of fun. Tell me if you got something out of it. And you can email me. It's parkerman2011@gmail.com, parkerman2011@gmail.com. So let's listen in. See what he's
What
talking
we have
about.
is on YouTube, 80% of you, 80% say that RFK Jr. will appear at Trump's rally tonight. How about on Twitch? What do our viewers on Twitch say? Let's see. A little less optimistic on Twitch, but still optimistic. The Twitch vote is 58% say yes, 42% say no.
So far, from looking at his show, he is saying that most people feel that RFK Jr. will appear at Trump's rally tonight. And if he happens to appear at Trump's rally tonight, does that mean that he will be dropping out? How many people think that he'll be dropping out? Let me know.
Thanks so much to our new member, Crime Girl 420. Thank you. We are bringing you live breaking news coverage. RFK Jr. about to address the nation. You are looking at live video. We're bringing you live coverage. We'll see what he has to say.
And we're bringing you live coverage too. So we have 27 minutes left to see what's going to happen. And what is he going to say? Is he going to say,
I'm not
I,
sure. Let me check his social media site, because when I last checked his site, I think they said he was going to take questions.
oh, well, that would be interesting then if RFK Jr. is going to be taking some questions. He's probably taking more questions right now than Kamala Harris is. So it'll be interesting to see what is being said. You're watching Keeping It Honest, yours truly, Anthony Parker. There's not much of a difference from doing it mainstream and streaming. So, like when you're on a time restraint, it holds you up whether you're watching it on TV or you're doing it streaming.
Conference. So maybe he'll take questions. I don't know. All right. Thank you for voting. Again, 80% of our YouTube viewers think he is going to appear at the Trump rally tonight, and 61% of our Twitch viewers. I appreciate you voting.
So, what do you think? Do you think if he appears at the Trump rally, is he doing this because he wants to endorse Trump? Because if you think about this, in the last couple of weeks, him and Trump have been talking. And what is that? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So if RFK's enemy is a Democratic Party and Donald Trump's enemy is a Democratic Party, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So let's join up and take them out. Think about that. Now they're potentially going to work together. How would you see that? Would you see if the Democrats won that they would want RFK in their administration? I don't know. But then if you flip it to the other side, what the Republicans want RFK in their administration. Something to think about. I can't wait. Hopefully you can't wait too to see what RFK is going to say.
Feed paused. Hold on a moment. Hold on a moment.
Something must be happening. 25 minutes left.
This is the Reuters feed. Hang on a moment here. They are temporarily frozen. They're back. The Reuters feed is back. The feed is back.
And this guy, he tends to get a little bit more excited. So let's feed off his excitement.
Kennedy might have his. You might think, oh well, he pulled his name out last night off the Arizona ballot. That's it. He's pulling out. But what Reuters reported is that his critics raised questions about the validity of some of his signatures in Arizona and the involvement of a pro-Kennedy super PAC to collect them.
That's one of the things that we're saying too. That with Kennedy, those signatures, and I can tell you from getting signatures and running for Congress, that they all have to be legitimate for them to count. And some are saying that some of the signatures that Kennedy's people got weren't legitimate.
Likely that he withdrew his name from Arizona because he's really pulling out of the race. But we'll have to see. And again, he can always change his mind. They're having a couple of little issues here with their feed, but
so would he change his mind after what happened yesterday where he pulled the names out? Maybe he did it because it was too embarrassing, and maybe because they just didn't go and get signatures right. Because if you got a team, and I've done it mostly on my own self, by myself, you got to make sure you got your things together before you go out and get the petitions. Technically, you can check them yourself. If you're running for president, that may be a little bit too hard. But there are ways to check these signatures and make sure they're valid before you send them into the state to see if they're valid, to see if you can run for that particular office.
I think we got Reuters back. We got Reuters back. We got a backup feed.
So I like the background of this with the two flags.
Hey, thank you so much. We have thank you, Rue Welch.
And this guy, Steve, he's on for every event. I mean, he covers war, he covers politics, he covers volcanoes, he covers assassination attempts, and he covers assassinations. I don't know how long he's been doing this, but if you want to know stuff about news besides watching our show as we start to grow, then he's the one that you follow, that you look at. And of course, you look at mine. He doesn't really give opinions. He just gives news. I do Parker twists and Parker spins.
I'd have to look it up.
So this is what live streaming is about. 22 minutes. And I can tell you when I was doing my streaming show covering the first night of the Democratic National Convention, I didn't know I'd be doing it for 5.5 hours. So with streaming, I mean, you can kind of take a break sometimes. Sometimes you can drink something, sometimes nibble. You don't see that on regular TV. They can't really do that. I mean, they could. But streaming, sometimes there's no limitations. And that's the good thing. There's no limitations. You can follow that person. And, when you do subscribe, thank you for subscribing. Make sure that you hit the notification button. So that way, whenever I do a live show, you guys will know.
Thanks to everybody for watching. We're bringing you live coverage. Look, we got live coverage. Oh, hold on a second. I got to fix something real quick.
Okay, while he's fixing something, I'll just let you know. I don't know the location where they're at, but it says they got about 20 more minutes before Robert F. Kennedy Jr. talks. And I found out yesterday that they even have a betting site for news events. So if things are happening, you can bet on it. Because they had people betting on how long Kamala's speech was going to be, how long Oprah's speech was going to be, the first person on stage, and you bet on news events. I'm not a betting man, but I guess it's popular to some people.
Leave some delegates who are leaving the convention, but there was no major violence with the protests. Really, the biggest incident I think was the fence stuff on Monday, where some fencing got torn down. But even then, you did not really see clashes between police and protesters.
And that's the good thing too. So they had 4 days of this, and we did some shots of the protesters outside because you would see them protesting, but it was peaceful. And inside, you see the people living a life as far as the Democratic convention was concerned. But the real world, people were protesting. And what did you think of Kamala's speech? Did you think she appeased everybody? She still didn't really say all what she was going to do. She just said she'd do it, but didn't give any examples of how she would do it. And we were even on last night. We decided to go on her website. There's no platforms on there. There's nothing really. It's all about donating. You would think somebody running for president that her team would be out there putting together this site so when people do get online, besides donating, they would see, okay, well, this is what I'll donate for. Even when I put on my website, I was running for Congress, I put my platforms, my positions, what I would do. It was just me. But here you have somebody running for president of the United States, and there was nothing, there was a bio on there and a lot of donation stuff. So we'll see today whether it's going to be fixed. And we're going to be doing Midnight at the Oasis. We do that literally every night at 12, where we talk about the day's news, where we talk about the next day. So stay tuned. Midnight for Midnight at the Oasis. And it's a live show. We just started that not too long ago. And in between that, we do our Keeping It Honest show where we do clips, we do live shows, we do short form, we do long form. And now we're starting to get into breaking news. And this is where the Patreon comes in. It's a site where you can contribute to our show to help better our show so we can be like this guy, Steve. Steve's his name. And be able to do even more things on this platform that we call social media. As we grow, you grow. And we appreciate that. We love you for it. Continue to join and be a part of our family. So right now it looks like he's froze, but he's just not talking. So now we have, let's see here. Okay, there we go. We have to refresh it.
Kennedy could drop his independent presidential bid and endorse the Republican nominee. Trump will be holding a rally in neighboring Glendale. This is in Phoenix. Kennedy is speaking in Phoenix. Trump will be holding a rally in neighboring Glendale tonight. Trump's campaign has teased that he will be joined by a special guest, though neither campaign responded to AP messages about whether Kennedy would be that guest. Again,
And I had that information too. I just don't have the paperwork. So Steve is reading it. And we'll let him read it and continue to tell you what's going to be happening today, because Trump is giving a rally today with a special guest, and it could be, wow, RFK.
Again, if it looks like Kennedy might appear at the Trump rally tonight, I will be covering that rally.
And so will yours truly too.
The Kennedy and Trump campaigns, say Associated Press, have ramped up their compliments to each other recently and engaged in behind-the-scenes discussions in recent weeks.
Yeah, they're really talking among each other now. So you figure if they're talking, there's got to be some kind of connection. They're doing technically the backroom deal.
According to those familiar with their efforts. Both campaigns have spent months accusing Democrats of weaponizing the legal system for their own benefit, and both have hinted publicly they could be open to joining forces with the shared goal of limiting the election chances of Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris.
So she's much of a force that they're saying, okay, let's get together and see if both of us can beat her.
Last month, during the Republican National Convention, Kennedy's son posted and then quickly deleted a video showing a phone call between Kennedy and Trump in which the former president appeared to try to talk Kennedy into siding with him.
I don't know if any of you guys saw that too. It was a little short clip, and I think Trump was on the phone and the camera was there, and he was talking to Kennedy, but they put it up real quick, and then they took it down.
Talks between the two camps have continued with close Trump allies quietly lobbying Kennedy to drop out of the race and support Trump, according to a person familiar with the efforts who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss private conversations.
So this is a press release that was sent out, and I don't have my copy here, so thank you, Steve, for reading that.
And Kennedy's running mate, Nicole Shanahan, openly suggested on a podcast this week that his campaign might walk away right now and join forces with Donald Trump.
Because she's thinking about also running for governor, if not next year, 2026. So she says she supports RFK Kennedy as much as she can.
She entertained the idea that Kennedy could join Trump's administration as Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services.
And I don't think that's really, well, yeah, I guess because he's dealt with the COVID situation, so maybe he would be good. So for conspiracy people, how would you like him to be involved in that department?
AP also reports that there is some evidence that Kennedy's staying in the race would hurt Trump more than Harris. According to a July AP NORC poll, Republicans were significantly more likely than Democrats to have a favorable view of Kennedy.
So Republicans, that's what he's saying, would take away, instead of voting for Trump, they would go to Kennedy. So Trump's people are saying, why don't you just come over to us? And see, we can't drink coffee.
All right, guys. 14 minutes and 40 seconds until RFK Jr. addresses the nation. What do you think will happen? Oh, did RFK Twitter update? One of our viewers said, oh my gosh.
Okay, here we go. Let's hear if this is some breaking news. As you saw, he was drinking and also putting lip balm on him.
Oh my gosh. Did they update the time? Hold on a moment. I'm looking.
So we're not extended.
Oh, they updated the time. The second delay. We have our second delay. It is now 2:45 Eastern time. Oh, they delayed it again. Oh, they delayed it again
1 minute.
to 2:45. I'm sorry, I don't control the time.
Mhm.
This is the second delay. It was supposed to be 2, then it was 2:30, now it is 2:45.
So let's add.
Our viewer Peter Ulima says, "Are they still haggling in the background?" Well, I got to update my clock again.
Okay, and while we're doing that, let me get down here real quick.
All right. I'm sorry, guys. I got to update my clock again. Because they keep changing the time.
Yeah, they keep changing the time. Was 13 minutes. So let's see, after Steve updates his clock, we'll go off of his clock. You're watching Keeping It Honest with yours truly, Anthony Parker Alexander. And we're going to try to see if we can find some kind of story dealing with the RFK situation. So while I'm talking to you, I'm also typing. And let me see real quick. Stay tuned for tonight at midnight for Midnight at the Oasis. And like I said on air, we give you news, information, trying to see if we see anything on here. I'm looking on another page. Here we go. Let me see something real quick. If you have any questions or comments, you can email yours to me at parkerman2011@gmail.com, parkerman2011@gmail.com. Telephone number 216-702-3718, 216-702-3718. We got some late breaking news coming up right here. Let me see if I can give it to you. This is something dealing with Russia. And what is your take with Russia and the Ukraine war? So we have some information right here. I'm about to pull it up for you. Let me see. I think this is it. Okay, there we go. As we're waiting for the RFK speech to come on, let's break it in to what's happening here. Well, now we have a commercial break. Okay, so we have a commercial break. We're going to wait a little bit for that. We have late breaking news and fast breaking news. And then when you get to the news, there's no news. What do? Well, you ad lib. So this is what we do. So on the other station, we have Steve. He's doing his live late breaking RFK Jr. news. As I look on the internet and some of the other channels, they all are waiting for Robert F. Kennedy to see what he's going to talk about. Is he going to talk about, and you think about that, why would he want to talk unless it's something dealing with just told him? Either he's going to drop out, or he's going to continue, or he's going to be upset about the ballot, or he's going to say, I'm going to go with Trump. And remember, because after, who was the young guy that was running for president, for Trump, after he dropped out, I think later on that day or that next day, he was there with Trump supporting him. So when you have people politically that when they run, and I can tell you, you run for office, there's should be nothing personal, but people take things on a personal level. They don't want to see you run. So let's see. At the mayor, all right, let's see what's happening. Do we have late working? Okay, looks like we have late breaking. Gonna go.
On the trial of Hunter.
Here we go. I am over here trying to get the late breaking news as it keeps breaking. Okay, so now as a guy gets it, and I get it back over here, if I have to get off, okay, he's on a mic check. So now we're gonna go to the other late breaking news. And let's see. Okay, here we go. This is what's happening right now across the country.
This eruption came following a series of strong earthquakes. We're told the nearby town of Grantavik, which was evacuated during previous eruptions, is not in any danger this time around. Well, the news never stops. You can find us anywhere you stream live news. And if you're on the go, we're also on the ABC News app and abcnews.com. Also, I'm Kira Phillips. Thanks for streaming with us. A lot more news up next. But before we go, RFK Jr. just announced that he will withdraw from the presidential race and endorse Donald Trump. Live pictures out of Arizona here, where Trump happens to be holding a rally later this afternoon. As soon as RFK Jr. takes to the mic, you will hear it live. Now the question is, will his supporters turn to Trump? It could change the face of this election. Stay with us. More news ahead.
Wow, so RFK Jr. is saying that he is dropping out of the race. Man. So now you have Jill Stein, you have Cornel West. What are they going to do? Because do they have a chance? No. Are people going to approach them from Trump's party and say, look, if you guys drop out, I might include you in my cabinet? Deals, concessions. And you know, RFK, he will want to have a deal. He's not just going to drop out and that's it. Do you think Trump and him, that they pressured him to drop out? Late breaking news. This is going to be interesting. I can't wait now until RFK talks. And then our RFK supporters, are they going to go to Trump? Wow. You're watching Keeping It Honest. Yours truly, Anthony Parker Alexander. RFK dropping out the race. Is he dropping out because he found out he wasn't going to get any support? Was he dropping out because he found out no matter what city I go to and what state I go to, they're not going to let me in? So let's listen in also to what Steve has to say. Right now, he has nothing to say. These live shows, they're very interesting. I'm telling you. We're keeping it honest. Nobody has nothing to say. Really? RFK has dropped out. Somebody must have something to say. Let's find out. What do you have to say, Steve?
It says ahead of speech, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says in a Pennsylvania court filing, he is endorsing Trump. Ahead of a planned speech, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s campaign said in a Pennsylvania court filing today that he is endorsing Donald Trump for president. Kennedy's independent campaign also requested that he be removed from the Pennsylvania ballot, although it was not immediately clear if he was officially dropping out of the race.
So you heard it from Steve too. Breaking news, AP reports that Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s campaign said that they are dropping out. You know, I hate when people say they suspended. You're not suspending it. That's a good way of saying you're dropping out. Wow. And he was fighting. How do the Democrats feel now? Well, they really didn't care because, you know, they wanted him off anyway, more or less a nuisance than anything. But maybe that's why Oprah said in her speech that she was an independent and was trying to get the independence people to come there to their side. And Robert F. Kennedy said, no, I'm going to stop that real quick. I'm going to drop out and I'm going to endorse Donald Trump and they're going to follow me.
Kennedy was about to speak in Arizona about, quote, the present historical moment and his path forward, according to his campaign. Hours later, Trump will be holding a rally in neighboring Glendale, Arizona. Trump's campaign has teased that he will be joined by a special guest, though neither campaign responded to messages about whether Kennedy would be that guest.
So who's going to be the one that's going to be the special guest? I don't think it's going to be me. I don't think it's going to be Steve. I'm thinking it's going to be RFK Jr.
And Kennedy withdrew from the ballot in Arizona late yesterday. Whew, guys, 15 minutes. 15 minutes if it starts at the set time.
Excuse me. 15 minutes on the nose. That's probably RFK Jr.'s most important speech. Did you think he even had a pathway over the time that he was running? He started on the Democratic Party, he started way down at the bottom, if you remember. Him and Marianne Williamson. Out of everybody running for office, you had Marianne Williamson, who nobody really paid attention to, and he had RFK Jr. And then he had Joe Biden. And out of those, I forgot the one other guy that ran in the Democratic Party, but that was your choices against Biden, and Biden was winning in every state because it was hard for them to kind of get in those states, and then Biden drops out, and then Kamala takes Biden's place. Was this a fair election where we got to pick the people that we really wanted to pick? And let's see, we have something else breaking now, so let me see if I can get to that. You're watching Keep It Honest. Yours truly, Anthony Parker Alexander, as we go all over the place to give you the news that you can use and that we learn. So let's see what this one's about.
Last night, Democrats being the underdogs. As Tim Walz said in his speech, feeling like they are in the fourth quarter and down a field goal, as Tim Walz, formerly Coach Walz, used as a metaphor there. So Democrats are trying to play like they are behind, but the question facing them is if poll after poll continue to come out and show Kamala Harris on top, do they get complacent between now and November?
Well, who else do you think made a big splash this week at the DNC? I know it's going to be tough because we had such great music, but when it came down to substance, what do you think?
Well, there were a couple things that stood out to some of the folks I talked to. The first.
So they're talking about such great music. Okay, what about some of the people that were talking?
Thing was the families of the various candidates. And it's not necessarily politics or policy, but one of the things Democrats said that they were not necessarily concerned about, but mindful of, is that Americans don't necessarily know these two candidates. They either don't know much about Kamala Harris, or some voters, Democrats say, have preconceived notions about her. And then Tim Walz is virtually a political unknown. So seeing the families of those candidates, Kamala Harris's stepchildren and nieces and nephews and her husband give that speech. And then, of course, that moment with Tim Walz where his son Gus stands up and points and says, "That's my dad." Democrats believe that can go a long way, particularly in some necessary swing states. The other thing are the Republicans that addressed this convention, just about a handful, but former Trump administration officials or former Republican congressmen like Adam Kinzinger saying in their view, Donald Trump is a threat. Democrats say they believe that went a long way too.
So coming up, RFK Jr. makes a campaign announcement today in Phoenix, should be coming up really soon. And says in Pennsylvania court filing, he will endorse, this is what he said, Trump for president. So how did he spin that around when he didn't like Trump? We're going to find out.
Well, it was quite a wild rumor. We're going to have a little fun now that was swirling around. Beyonce was going to perform at the DNC. I mean, even our Rick Klein was saying, okay, something's going on. There's a black curtain that went up. We can't see behind it. So what's your gut? There's this conspiracy theory now that they were pumping this message to get people to watch. I don't.
So that's interesting. So if they were just saying that she was going to be there and wasn't, that's kind of, wrong.
know.
It's a rumor I never believed, to be completely honest.
Really?
Only because no one quite knew the timing and all of that stuff. We heard them mic check one of her songs once down there on the floor, and then I started to believe the rumor, and nobody really knows. But to your point, it did build up to the enthusiasm all night long. I was talking with Democrats who were in the room who said they were here for Kamala Harris, but also if Beyonce stepped out on that stage, they were there for her too. But nonetheless, they were still happy with what they heard out of Kamala Harris. They still feel like they have that enthusiasm. They just said maybe Beyonce would have been an added bonus.
Of course. Well, of course, her song "Freedom" is sort of the mantra of this entire ride for the vice president right now, and just the word itself says a lot. Jay O'Brien, appreciate you. Good to see you.
Yeah, so did they just say Beyonce? Because I know when I was doing the live show yesterday, and they were talking about Beyonce was in her helicopter on her way there. And I kept saying, oh my God, that means I won't be able to continue to play or hear the show when she's singing because of copyright issues. So I'm glad she didn't show up.
So VP Harris definitely brought the heat last night, but let's get a reality check with some cold, hard numbers. Let's bring in our host of 538 Politics Podcast, Galen Druk. So Harris is leading Trump in 538's national polling average right now. So is it real or is this just a honeymoon period, you
So that's good. So now we're getting facts and figures and numbers.
think?
Yeah, here with those cold, hard numbers, Kira. So I should say that if this is a honeymoon period, it's certainly not just the convention. Harris has been on a rise basically since she took the helm of the Democratic Party about a month ago. Going into this convention, she was leading by about 3 percentage points nationally. Now she's closer to 4, and the convention isn't fully priced into the polling yet, so it wouldn't surprise me if that continued to rise over the coming week or so. As my colleague Jay mentioned, perceptions of Harris and Walz are relatively limited. They haven't been in public life for decades like Trump or Biden. And so if they manage to make a good impression on Americans, their favorability ratings and perhaps support for them is malleable enough that they may pick up some new voters.
So RFK Jr. officially withdrew his petition to be on the ballot in Arizona. We talked a lot about this week. It's the first tangible sign that he plans to exit the presidential race. If he does drop out, Galen, and endorses Trump, how do you think that's going to impact the race?
Right. It's a tricky question. And right now we can make some assumptions, but we'll have to wait and see for sure. So here's what I know. About a month ago, RFK Jr. had about 8 percentage point support in the national polls. That's fallen to about 4% now, which is to suggest that some of his support that he was getting because folks didn't like either Trump or Biden has now gone to Harris. So there's some reason to believe that that remaining 4% could be a little more Trump friendly than the rest of his broader support when Biden was still in the race. My colleagues at 538 looked into this, and the data suggests that maybe there's about a 0.5 percentage point of gain for Trump in some of that. But it's important to say, Kira, that if folks are supporting RFK Jr., it's because they don't like the major parties, and so they may just end up not voting at all.
And that's interesting too, because if he's only going to give maybe 4%, maybe not even that much, will that really help Trump? And if those people believe we didn't want Trump or Biden, that's why we picked Kennedy, and now Kennedy's dropping out, and we're not going to vote. So this is just going to be very interesting to see where everything stands.
All right. Galen Druk, we'll see what happens. Still waiting just for that formal announcement, if indeed it happens, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Appreciate you. We're going to keep the conversation going now. Author and activist Raquel Willis, along with former Republican Congressman of New York, John Katko, joining me now. So Raquel, last night, 4 members of the Central Park Five, men wrongly convicted, imprisoned for the rape of a woman in New York City back in 1989, actually spoke at the DNC. It was a powerful moment. Let's take a listen. I want to ask you about this.
45 wanted us unalive. He wanted us dead. Today, we are exonerated because the actual perpetrator confessed and DNA proved it. That guy says he still stands by the original guilty verdict. He has never changed, and he never will.
We think about every single Black woman who is not in a history book. I'm getting emotional, and I think we've been emotional all day. I think about my own grandmothers. I think about my mother. I think about Black women who fought in this country knowing that they would never see this day, but they believed that it would be here. We have an obligation to make sure that we cross the line, and I think that's why we're going to see Black women work hard between now and November.
Just to give a little context there, that was yesterday when I spoke with Jateka Edie, founder of Win with Black Women, about how Black women are galvanizing support for Kamala Harris across the country. So taking into account, Raquel, what we just heard with regard to Black men and that vote, now Black women who already have supported the Democratic Party, especially Joe Biden. It helped him tremendously last time around. Do you agree with the sentiments that they say? Do Black Americans have an obligation to show up and support Harris, and will they?
That's a good question, because she's African American. Kamala, should Black people support her?
Well, I think it's important for us to always remember that none of these voting blocs are a monolith. I definitely think it was important for this demonstration of Black men who have been failed by our criminal justice system to be showcased in this way, especially when we know that Donald Trump is trying to appeal to Black Americans in some of the clumsiest and most racist ways. Right. So I think that was important. I also think in this kind of larger discussion around the ramifications of this week, this was a historic demonstration of just how far the U.S. has come in terms of representation, especially politically. But I think we also saw some of the limits, right? I mean, I think the glaring refusal to platform a Palestinian American speaker was something that we heard a lot about amongst various communities. And I know personally, as a Black trans woman, I was very disappointed that there were no trans folks to speak directly to anti-trans legislation. I mean, the RNC was a showcase of some of the worst discussions about the trans experience. And so I was really looking to see us go a little bit further, but there's no discounting the historical presence of this campaign.
Point well made. And John, yesterday, former Republican Congresswoman Barbara Comstock talked to us about why she's supporting Kamala Harris. The Harris campaign has made a real effort to reach out to Republicans like her and Adam Kinzinger, who spoke on the stage last night as well. How can Harris gain support from more Republicans, in particular, Republicans like you?
I think she just has to continue doing what she's doing and show the differences between her and Donald Trump. I think that's really all she has to do. And I think that she's winning in that regard because the polls are showing that.
So we are now about to go, hopefully. Here we come. You're going to do it. You see real quick. He's on stage.
16 months ago, in April of 2023, I launched my campaign for President of the United States. I began this journey as a Democrat, the party of my father, my uncle, the party which I pledged my own allegiance to long before I was old enough to vote. I attended my first Democratic convention at the age of 6 in 1960. And back then, the Democrats were the champions of the Constitution, of civil rights. The Democrats stood against authoritarianism, against censorship, against colonialism, imperialism, and unjust wars. We were the party of labor, of the working class. The Democrats were the party of government transparency and the champion of the environment. Our party was the bulwark against big money interests and corporate power. True to its name, it was the party of democracy. As you know, I left that party in October because it had departed so dramatically from the core values that I grew up with. It had become the party of war, censorship, corruption, big pharma, big tech, big ag, and big money. When it abandoned democracy by canceling the primary to conceal the cognitive decline of the sitting president, I left the party to run as an independent. The mainstream of American politics and journalism derided my decision. Conventional wisdom said that it would be impossible even to get on the ballot as an independent because each state poses an insurmountable tangle of arbitrary rules for collecting signatures. I would need over 1 million signatures, something no presidential candidate in history had ever achieved. And then I'd need a team of attorneys and millions of dollars to handle all the legal challenges from the DNC. The naysayers told us that we were climbing a glass version of Mount Impossible. So the first thing I want to tell you is that we proved them wrong. We did it because beneath the radar of mainstream media organs, we inspired a massive independent political movement. More than 100,000 volunteers sprang into action, hopeful that they could reverse our nation's decline. Many worked 10-hour days, sometimes in blizzards and blazing heat. They sacrificed family time, personal commitments, and sleep month after month, energized by a shared vision of a nation healed of its divisions. They set up tables at churches and farmers markets. They canvassed door to door. In Utah and in New Hampshire, volunteers collected signatures in snowstorms, convincing each supporter to stop in the frigid cold, to take off their gloves, and to sign legibly. During a heat wave in Nevada, I met a tall, athletic volunteer who cheerfully told me that he had lost 25 pounds collecting signatures in 117-degree heat. To finance this effort, young Americans donated their lunch money, and senior citizens gave up part of their Social Security checks. Our 50-state organization collected those millions of signatures and more. No presidential campaign in American political history has ever done that. And so I want to thank all of those dedicated volunteers and congratulate the campaign staff who coordinated this enormous logistical feat. Your accomplishments were regarded as impossible. You carried me up that glass mountain. You pulled off a miracle. You achieved what all the pundits said could never be done. You have my deepest gratitude, and I'm never going to forget that, not just for what you did for my campaign, but for the sacrifices you made because you love our country. You showed everyone that democracy is still possible here. It continues to survive in the press and in the idealistic human energies that still thrive beneath a canvas of neglect and of official and institutional corruption. Today, I'm here to tell you that I will not allow your efforts to go to waste. I'm here to tell you that I will leverage your tremendous accomplishments to serve the ideals that we share, the ideals of peace, of prosperity, of freedom, of health, all the ideals that motivated my campaign. I'm here today to describe the path forward that you've opened with your commitment and with your hard labors. Now, in an honest system, I believe that I would have won the election. In a system the kind that my father and my uncles thrived in, a system with open debates, with fair primaries, with regularly scheduled debate, with fair primaries, and with a truly independent media untainted by government propaganda and censorship. In a system of nonpartisan courts and election boards, everything would be different. After all, the polls consistently showed me beating each of the other candidates, both in favorability and also in head-to-head matchups. But I'm sorry to say that while democracy may still be alive at the grassroots, it has become little more than a slogan for our political institutions, for our media, and for our government, and most sadly at all for me, the Democratic Party. In the name of saving democracy, the Democratic Party set itself to dismantling it, lacking confidence in its candidate, that its candidate could win in a fair election at the voting booth. The DNC waged continual legal warfare against both President Trump and myself. Each time that our volunteers turned in those towering boxes of signatures needed to get on the ballot, the DNC dragged us into court, state after state, attempting to erase their work and to subvert the will of the voters who had signed those petitions. It deployed DNC-aligned judges to throw me and other candidates off the ballot and to throw President Trump in jail. It ran a sham primary that was rigged to prevent any serious challenge to President Biden. Then, when a predictably bungled debate performance precipitated the palace coup against President Biden, the same shadowy DNC operatives appointed his successor, also without an election. They installed a candidate who was so unpopular with voters that she dropped out in 2020 without winning a single delegate. My uncle and my father both relished debate. They prided themselves on their capacity to go toe-to-toe with any opponent in the battle over ideas. They would be astonished to learn of a Democratic Party presidential nominee who, like Vice President Harris, has not appeared in a single interview or an unscripted encounter with voters for 35 days. This is profoundly undemocratic. How are people to choose when they don't know whom they are choosing? And how can this look to the rest of the world? My father and my uncle were always conscious of America's image abroad because of our nation's role as the template for democracy, the role model for democratic processes, and the leader of the free world. Instead of showing us her substance and character, the DNC and its media organs engineered a surge of popularity for Vice President Harris based upon, well, nothing. No policies, no interviews, no debates, only smoke and mirrors and balloons in a highly produced Chicago circus. There in Chicago, a string of Democratic speakers mentioned Donald Trump 147 times just on the first day. Oh, who needs a policy when you have Trump to hate? In contrast, at the RNC convention, President Biden was mentioned only twice in 4 days. I do interviews every day. Many of you have interviewed me. Anybody who asks gets to interview me. Some days I do as many as 10. President Trump, who actually was nominated and won an election, also does interviews daily. How did the Democratic Party choose a candidate that has never done an interview or debate during the entire election cycle? We know the answers. They did it by weaponizing the government agencies. They did it by abandoning democracy. They did it by suing the opposition. and by disenfranchising American voters. What most alarms me isn't how the Democratic Party conducts its internal affairs or runs its candidates. What alarms me is the resort to censorship and media control and the weaponization of the federal agencies. When a US president colludes with or outright coerces media companies to censor political speech, it's an attack on our most sacred right of free expression, and that's the very right upon which all of our other constitutional rights rest. President Biden mocked Vladimir Putin's 88% landslide in the Russian elections, observing that Putin and his party controlled the Russian press and that Putin prevented serious opponents from appearing on the ballot. But here in America, the DNC also prevented opponents from appearing on the ballot. And our television networks expose themselves as Democratic Party organs. Over the course of more than a year in a campaign where my poll numbers reached at times in the high 20s, the DNC-aligned mainstream media networks maintain a near perfect embargo on interviews with me. During his 10-month presidential campaign in 1992, Ross Perot gave 34 interviews on mainstream networks. In contrast, during the 16 months since I declared, ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, and CNN combined gave only 2 live interviews from me. Those networks instead ran a continuous deluge of hit pieces with inaccurate, often vile, pejoratives and defamatory smears. Some of those same networks and colluded with the DNC to keep me off the debate stage. Representatives of those networks are in this room right now, and I'll just take a moment to ask you to consider the many ways that your institutions have abdicated this really sacred responsibility, the duty of a free press to safeguard democracy and to challenge always the party in power. Instead of maintaining that posture of fear, skepticism toward authority, your institutions have made themselves government mouthpieces and stenographers for the organs of power. You didn't alone cause the devolution of American democracy, but you could have prevented it. The Democratic Party's censorship of social media was even more of a naked exercise of executive power. This week, a federal judge, Terry Doty, upheld my injunction against President Biden, calling the White House's censorship project, quote, the most egregious violation of the First Amendment in the history of the United States of America. Doty's previous 155-page decision details how just 37 hours after he took the oath of office, swearing to uphold the Constitution, President Biden and his White House opened up a portal and then invited the CIA, the FBI, CISA, which is a censorship agency, it's the center of the censorship industrial complex, DHS, the IRS, and other agencies to censor me and other political dissidents on social media. Even today, users who try to post my campaign videos to Facebook or YouTube get messages that this content violates community standards. 2 days after Judge Doty rendered his decision this week, Facebook was still attaching warning labels to an online petition calling on ABC to include me in the upcoming debate. They said that violates community standards, their community standards. The mainstream media was once the guardian of the First Amendment and democratic principles, and it's joined this systemic attack on democracy. It also, the media justifies their censorship on the grounds of combating misinformation, but governments and oppressors don't censor lies. They don't fear lies. They fear the truth, and that's what they censor. And I don't want any of this to sound like a personal complaint, because it's not. For me, it's all part of a journey, and it's a journey that I signed up with. But I need to make these observations because I think they're critical for us doing the thing that we need to do as citizens in a democracy to assess where we are in this country and what our democracy still looks like, and the assumptions about U.S. leadership around the globe. And are we really still a role model for democracy in this country? Or have we made it, a kind of a joke? And here's the good news. While mainstream outlets denied me a critical platform, they didn't shut down my ideas, which have especially flourished among young voters and independent voters, thanks to the alternative media. Many months ago, I promised the American people that I would withdraw from the race if I became a spoiler. A spoiler is someone who will alter the outcome of the election but has no chance of winning. In my heart, I no longer believe that I have a realistic path to electoral victory in the face of this relentless systematic censorship and media control. So I cannot in good conscience ask my staff and volunteers to keep working their long hours or ask my donors to keep giving when I cannot honestly tell them that I have a real path to the White House. Furthermore, our polling consistently showed that by staying on the ballot in the battleground states, I would likely hand the election over to the Democrats with whom I disagree on the most existential issues: censorship, war, and chronic disease. I want everyone to know that I am not terminating my campaign. I am simply suspending it and not ending it. My name will remain on the ballot in most states. If you live in a blue state, you can vote for me without harming or helping President Trump or Vice President Harris. In red states, the same will apply. I encourage you to vote for me. And if enough of you do vote for me, and neither of the major party candidates win 270 votes, which is quite possible. In fact, today our polling shows them tying at 269 to 269. And I could conceivably still end up in the White House in a contingent election. But in about 10 battleground states where my presence would be a spoiler, I'm going to remove my name. And I've already started that process and urge voters not to vote for me. It's with a sense of victory and not defeat that I'm suspending my campaign activities. Not only did we do the impossible by collecting 1 million signatures, we changed the national political conversation forever. Chronic disease, free speech, government corruption, breaking our addiction to war have moved to the center of politics. I can say to all who have worked so hard the last year and a half, thank you for a job well done. 3 great causes drove me to enter this race in the first place, primarily. And these are the principal causes that persuaded me to leave the Democratic Party and run as an independent. And now to throw my support to President Trump. The causes were free speech, a war in Ukraine, and the war on our children. I've already described some of my personal experiences and struggles with the government's censorship industrial complex. I want to say a word about the Ukraine war. The military industrial complex has provided us with a familiar comic book justification, like they do on every war, that this one is a noble effort to stop a supervillain, Vladimir Putin, invading the Ukraine and then to thwart his Hitler-like march across Europe. In fact, tiny Ukraine is a proxy in a geopolitical struggle initiated by the ambitions of the US neocons or American global hegemony. I'm not excusing Putin for invading Ukraine. He had other options. But the war is Russia's predictable response to the reckless neocon project of extending NATO to encircle Russia, a hostile act. The credulous media rarely explain to Americans that we unilaterally walked away from 2 intermediate nuclear weapons treaties with Russia and then put nuclear-ready Aegis missile systems in Romania and Poland. This is a hostile act. And that the Biden White House repeatedly spurned Russia's offer to settle this war peacefully. The Ukraine war began in 2014 when U.S. agencies overthrew the democratically elected government of Ukraine and installed a hand-picked pro-Western government that launched a deadly civil war against ethnic Russians in Ukraine. In 2019, America walked away from a peace treaty, the Minsk Agreement, that had been negotiated between Russia and Ukraine by European nations. And then in April of 2022, we wanted the war. In April of 2022, President Biden sent Boris Johnson to Ukraine to force President Zelensky to tear up a peace agreement that he and the Russians had already signed, and the Russians were withdrawing troops from Kiev and Donbass and Lugansk. And that peace agreement would have brought peace to the region and would have allowed Donbass and Lugansk to remain part of Ukraine. President Biden stated that month that his objective in the war was regime change in Russia. His Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, simultaneously explained that America's purpose in the war was to exhaust the Russian army, to degrade its capacity to fight anywhere else in the world. These objectives, of course, have nothing to do with what they were telling Americans about protecting Ukraine's sovereignty. Ukraine is a victim in this war, and it's a victim of the West. Since then, of Russia and both Russia and the West. Since then, we have, since tearing up that agreement, forcing Zelensky to tear up the agreement, we've squandered the flower of Ukrainian youth, as many as 600,000 Ukrainian kids, and over 100,000 Russian kids, all of whom we should be mourning, have died, and the Ukraine's infrastructure is destroyed. The war has been a disaster for our country as well. We squandered nearly $200 billion already, and these are badly needed dollars in our communities, suffering communities all over our country. The Nord Stream pipeline sabotage and the sanctions have destroyed Europe's industrial base, which formed the bulwark of U.S. national security. A strong Germany with a strong industry is a much, much stronger deterrent to Russia, and a Germany that is deindustrialized and turned into just an extension of U.S. military base. We've pushed Russia into a disastrous alliance with China and Iran. We're closer to the brink of nuclear exchange than at any time since 1962. And the neocons in the White House don't seem to care at all. Our moral authority and our economy are in shambles. And the war gave rise to the emergence of BRICS, which now threatens to replace the dollar as the global reserve currency. This is a first-class calamity for our country. Judging by her bellicose, belligerent speech last night in Chicago, we can assume that President Harris will be an enthusiastic advocate for this and other neocon military adventures. And President Trump says that he will reopen negotiations with President Putin and end the war overnight as soon as he becomes president. This alone would justify my support for his campaign. Last summer, it looked like no candidate was willing to negotiate a quick end to the Ukraine war, to tackle chronic disease epidemic, to protect free speech, our constitutional freedoms, to clean corporate influence out of our government, or to defy the neocons and their agenda of endless military adventurism. But now one of the two candidates has adopted these issues as his own, to the point where he has asked to enlist me in his administration. I'm speaking, of course, of Donald Trump. Less than 2 hours after President Trump narrowly escaped assassination, Callie Means called me on my cell phone. I was then in Las Vegas. Callie is arguably the leading advocate for food safety, for soil regeneration, and for ending the chronic disease epidemic that is destroying America's health and ruining our economy. Callie has exposed the insidious corruption at the FDA, the NIH, the HHS, and the USDA that has caused the epidemic. Callie had been working on and off for my campaign, advising me on those subjects since the beginning. And those subjects have been my primary focus for the last 20 years. I was delighted when Callie told me that day that he had also been advising President Trump. He told me President Trump was anxious to talk to me about chronic disease and other subjects and to explore avenues of cooperation. He asked if I would take a call from the president. President Trump telephoned me a few minutes later, and I met with him the following day. A few weeks later, I met again with President Trump and his family members and closest advisors in Florida. In a series of long, intense discussions, I was surprised to discover that we are aligned on many key issues. In those meetings, he suggested that we join forces as a unity party. We talked about Abraham Lincoln's team of rivals. That arrangement would allow us to disagree publicly and privately and fiercely, if need be, on issues over which we differ, while working together on the existential issues upon which we are in concordance. I was a ferocious critic of many of the policies during his first administration, and there are still issues and approaches upon which we continue to have very serious differences. We are aligned with each other on other key issues like ending the forever wars, ending the childhood disease epidemics, securing the border, protecting freedom of speech, unraveling the corporate capture of our regulatory agencies, getting the US intelligence agencies out of the business of propagandizing and censoring and surveilling Americans and interfering with our elections. Following my first discussion with President Trump, I tried unsuccessfully to open similar discussions with Vice President Harris. Vice President Harris declined to meet or even to speak with me. Suspending my candidacy is a heart-rending decision for me, but I'm convinced that it's the best hope for ending the Ukraine war and ending the chronic disease epidemic that is eroding our nation's vitality from the inside, and for finally protecting free speech. I feel a moral obligation to use this opportunity to save millions of American children, above all things. In case some of you don't realize how dire the condition is of our children's health and chronic disease in general, I would urge you to view Dr. Carlson's recent interview with Callie Means and his sister, Dr. Casey Means, who is the top graduate of her class at Stanford Medical School. This is an issue that affects all of us far more directly and urgently than any culture war issue and all the other issues that we obsess on and that are tearing apart our country. This is the most important issue. Therefore, it has the potential to bring us together. So let me share a little bit about why I believe it's so urgent. Today, 2/3, we spend more on healthcare than any country on earth, twice what they pay in Europe. And yet we have the worst health outcomes of any nation in the world. We're about 79th in health outcomes behind Costa Rica and Nicaragua and Mongolia and other countries. Nobody has a chronic disease burden like we have. And during the COVID epidemic, we had the highest body count of any country in the world. We had 16% of the COVID deaths, and we only have 4.2% of the world's population. And CDC says that's because we are the sickest people on earth. We have the highest chronic disease rate on earth. And the average American who died from COVID had 3.8 chronic diseases. So these were people who had immune system collapse, who had mitochondrial dysfunction. And no other country has anything like this. 2/3 of American adults and children suffer from chronic health issues. 50 years ago, that number was less than 1%. So we've gone from 1% to 66%. In America, 74% of Americans are now overweight or obese, and 50% of our children. 120 years ago, when somebody was obese, they were sent to the circus. There were case reports done about them. Obesity was almost unknown. In Japan, the childhood obesity rate is 3% compared to 50% a year. Half of Americans have pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. When my uncle was president, I was a boy. Juvenile diabetes was effectively non-existent. A typical pediatrician would see one case of diabetes during his entire career, a 40 or 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walks through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic. And the mitochondrial disorder that caused diabetes also causing Alzheimer's, which is now classified as diabetes. And it's costing this country more than our military budget every year. There's been an explosion of neurological illnesses that I never saw as a kid: ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, Tourette's syndrome, narcolepsy, ASD, Asperger's, autism. In the year 2000, the autism rate was 1 in 1,500. Now, autism rates in kids are 1 in 36, according to CDC nationally. Nobody's talking about this. 1 in every 22 kids in California has autism. And this is a crisis that 77% of our kids are too disabled to serve in the United States military. What is happening to our country? And why isn't this in the headlines every single day? There's nobody else in the world that is experiencing this. This is only happening in America. About 18%, and by the way, there has been no change in diagnosis, which the industry sometimes like to say. There has been no change in screening. This is a change in incidence. In my generation, 70-year-old men, the autism rates are about 1 in 10,000. In my kids' generation, 1 in 34. I'll repeat, in California, 1 in 22. Why are we letting this happen? Why are we allowing this to happen to our children? These are the most precious assets that we have in this country. How can we let this happen to them? About 18% of American teens now have fatty liver disease. That's like 1 out of every 5. That disease, when I was a kid, only affected late-stage alcoholics who were elderly. Cancer rates are skyrocketing in the young and the old. Young adult cancers are up 79%. 1 in 4 American women is on antidepressant medication. 40% of teens have a mental health diagnosis. And 15% of high schoolers are on Adderall, and 500,000 children on SSRIs. So what's causing this suffering? I'll name 2 culprits. First, and the worst, is ultra-processed food. About 70% of American children's diet is ultra-processed. That means industrial manufactured in a factory. These foods consist primarily of processed sugar, ultra-processed grains, and seed oils. Laboratory scientists who many of whom formerly worked for the cigarette industry, which purchased all the big food companies in the 1970s and 80s, deployed thousands of scientists to figure out new chemicals to make the food more addictive. And these ingredients didn't exist 100 years ago. A, humans aren't biologically adapted to eat them. Hundreds of these chemicals are now banned in Europe, but ubiquitous in American processed foods. The second culprit is toxic chemicals in our food, our medicine, and our environment. Pesticides, food additives, pharmaceutical drugs, and toxic waste permeate every cell of our bodies. The assault on our children's cells and hormones is unrelenting. And name just one problem. Many of these chemicals increase estrogen because young children are ingesting so many of these hormone disruptors. America's puberty rate is now occurring at age 10 to 13, which is 6 years earlier than girls were reaching puberty in 1900. Our country has the earliest puberty rates of any continent on the earth. And no, this isn't because of better nutrition. This is not normal. Breast cancer is also estrogen driven, and it now strikes 1 in 8 women. We are mass poisoning all of our children and our adults. Considering the grievous human cost of this tragic epidemic of chronic disease, it seems almost crass to mention the damage it does to our economy. But I'll say, it is crippling the nation's finances. When my uncle was president, our country spent $0 on chronic disease. Today, government healthcare spending is almost all for chronic disease. And it's double the military budget. And it is the fastest growing budget item in the federal budget. Chronic disease costs more to the economy as a whole, costs at least $4 trillion, 5 times our military budget. And that's a 20% drag on everything we do and everything we aspire to. Poor and minority communities suffer disproportionately. People who worry about DEI or about bigotry of any kind, this dwarfs anything. We are poisoning the poor. We are systematically poisoning minorities across this country. Industry lobbyists have made sure that most of the food stamp lunch program, about 70% of food stamps and about 70 or 77% of school lunches are processed foods. There's no vegetables. There's nothing that you would want to eat. We are just poisoning the poor citizens, and that's why they have the highest chronic disease burden of anybody, any demographic in our country, and the highest in the world. The same food industry lobbied to make sure that nearly all agricultural subsidies go to commodity crops that are the feedstock of processed food industry. These policies are destroying small farms, and they're destroying our soils. We give about, I think, 8 times as much in subsidies to tobacco than we do to fruits and vegetables. It makes no sense. If we want a healthy country, the good news is that we can change all this. We can change it very, very quickly. America can get healthy again. To do that, we need to do 3 things. First, we need to root out the corruption in our health agencies. Second, we need to change incentives in our healthcare system. And third, we need to inspire Americans to get healthy again. 80% of NIH grants go to people who have conflicts of interest. These are the people, virtually everybody who sits, Joe Biden just appointed a new panel to NIH to decide the food recommendations. And they're all people who are from the industry. They're all people who are from the processed food companies. They're deciding what Americans, here is healthy. And the recommendations on the food pyramid and what goes to our school lunch programs, what go to the program, the Swiss program, the food stamp programs. They're all corrupted and conflicted individuals. These agencies, the FDA, USDA, and CDC, all of them are controlled by giant for-profit corporations. 75% of the FDA's funding doesn't come from taxpayer, it comes from pharma. And pharma executives and consultants and lobbyists cycle in and out of these agencies with President Trump's backing. I'm going to change that. We're going to staff these agencies with honest scientists and doctors who are free from industry funding. We're going to make sure the decisions of consumers, doctors, and patients are informed by unbiased science. A sick child is the best thing for the pharmaceutical industry. When American children or adults get sick with a chronic condition, they're put on medication for their entire life. Imagine what will happen when Medicare starts paying for Ozempic, which costs $1,500 a month, and it's being recommended for children as young as 6, all for a condition, obesity, that is completely preventable and barely even existed 100 years ago. And 74% of Americans are obese. The cost, if all of them took their Ozempic prescription, is $3 trillion a year. This is a drug that is made by Novo Nordisk, the biggest company in Europe. It's a Danish company, and the Danish government does not recommend it. It recommends change in diet to treat obesity and exercise. And in our country, the recommendation now is for Ozempic to children at age 6. Novo Nordisk, the biggest company in Europe, and virtually its entire value is based upon its projections of what it's going to sell, of the Ozempic it's going to sell to America. And we have the food lobbyists have a bill in front of Congress today that is backed by the White House, backed by Vice President Harris and President Biden to allow this to happen. This $3 trillion cost that is going to bankrupt our country. For a fraction of that amount, we could buy organic food for every American family, 3 meals a day, and eliminate diabetes altogether. We're going to bring healthy food back to school lunches. We're going to stop subsidizing the worst foods with our agricultural subsidies. We're going to get toxic chemicals out of our food. We're going to reform the entire food system. And for that, we need new leadership in Washington. Because unfortunately, both the Democrats and the Republican parties are in cahoots with the big food producers, Big Pharma and Big Ag, which are among the DNC's major donors. Vice President Harris has expressed no interest in addressing this issue. 4 more years of Democratic rule will complete the consolidation of corporate and neocon power, and our children will be the ones who suffer most. I got involved with chronic disease 20 years ago, not because I chose to or wanted to. It was essentially thrust upon me. It was an issue that should have been central to the environmental movement. I was a central leader at that time, but it was widely ignored by all the institutions, including the NGOs, who should have been protecting our kids against toxins. It was an orphaned issue, and I had a weakness for orphans. I watched generations of children get sicker and sicker. I had 11 siblings, and I had 7 kids myself. I was conscious of what was happening in their classrooms and to their friends, and I watched these sick kids, these damaged kids. In that generation, almost all of them are damaged. And nobody in power seemed to care or to even notice. For 19 years, I prayed every morning that God would put me in a position to end this calamity. The chronic disease crisis was one of the primary reasons for my running for president, along with ending censorship in the Ukraine war. It's the reason I've made the heart-wrenching decision to suspend my campaign and to support President Trump. This decision is agonizing for me because of the difficulties it causes my wife and my children and my friends. But I have the certainty that this is what I've meant to do. And that certainty gives me internal peace, even in storms. If I'm given the chance to fix the chronic disease crisis and reform our food production, I promise that within 2 years, we will watch chronic disease burden lift dramatically. We will make Americans healthy again. Within 4 years, America will be a healthy country. We will be stronger, more resilient, more optimistic, and happier. I won't fail in doing this. Ultimately, the future however it happens, is in God's hands and in the hands of the American voters and those of President Trump. If President Trump is elected and honors his word, the vast burden of chronic disease that now demoralizes and bankrupts the country will disappear. This is a spiritual journey for me. I reached my decision through deep prayer, through hard-nosed logic, and I asked myself, what choices must I make to maximize my chances to save America's children and restore national health? I felt that if I refused this opportunity, I would not be able to look myself in the mirror, knowing that I could have saved lives of countless children and reversed this country's chronic disease epidemic. I'm 70 years old. I may have a decade to be effective. I can't imagine that President Harris would allow me or anyone to solve these dire problems. After 8 years of President Harris, any opportunity for me to fix the problem will be out of my reach forever. President Trump has told me that he wants this to be his legacy. I'm choosing to believe that this time he will follow through. His son, his biggest donors, his closest friends, and all support this objective. My joining the Trump campaign will be a difficult sacrifice for my wife and children, but worthwhile if there's even a small chance of saving these kids. Ultimately, the only thing that will save our country and our children is if we choose to love our kids more than we hate each other. That's why I launched my campaign to unify America. My dad and uncle made such an enduring mark on the character of our nation, not so much because of any particular policies that they promoted, but because they were able to inspire profound love for our country and to fortify our sense of ourselves as a national community held together by ideals. They were able to put their love into the intentions and hearts of ordinary Americans and to unify a national populist movement of Americans, Blacks and whites, Hispanics, urban and rural Americans. They inspired affection and love and high hopes and a culture of kindness that continue to radiate among Americans from their memory. That's the spirit on which I ran my campaign and that I intend to bring into the campaign of President Trump. Instead of vitriol and polarization, I will appeal to the values that unite us, the goals that we could achieve if only we weren't at each other's throats. The most unifying theme for all Americans is that we all love our children. If we all unite around that issue now, we can finally give them the protection, the health, and the future that they deserve. Thank you all very much.
Wow. Yeah. What do you think about that? Man? What do you think? Oh, we thought there were going to be some questions, but I guess there weren't from reporters. Got a little chilly in here. Keeping it honest. Yours truly, Anthony Parker, Alexander. A lot to talk about. We're going to save some of that for some shows later on today. But in essence, from what you saw, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. decided to suspend his run for president. And when people say suspend, I mean, really, they're dropping out. If you look at some of the mainstream media, says he dropped out. He says he suspended his campaign. So he looked at it as legacy and legacy for children. And he told some stories which we had heard about but didn't really know. Him and Donald Trump had talked a couple of weeks ago, right after Donald Trump had the assassination attempt. He called Donald Trump called him and pretty much said, hey, you know what, if you endorse me, then maybe I can give some of the issues that you want and have you on my cabinet because some of the stuff I like. And I like what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said after talking to Trump. he was thinking, wow, I don't know if I can win. I don't want to be a spoiler, but Trump has given me a chance to maybe come on board, team up with him, and I can do things as far as the healthiness of the kids of the future. But first, let me go back to the Democrats, see what they may have to offer. He says there was no communication between him and Miss Harris. So it's like the devil you know, devil you don't know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So let's say you have a talent. And well, you want to run for office. And you know that you might be a spoiler, Democrats, Republicans, and youth. Some of your ideas are good. But then Democrats or Republicans, one of them approach you first and say, you know what, I like some of your ideas. I want your people. I want to do what Lincoln did. One thing that Lincoln did, and that Obama did, because Lincoln was one of Obama's favorite presidents. Lincoln and Obama went after some of the same people that they were running against because they didn't want any yes men all the time, and put them in their cabinet so that way they would have different views. So why can't you too? Why can't more people think that if you're a Democrat and you win, bring in some Republicans that were against you, but you like some of their ideas, and then they can keep you sharp. So from what I gathered, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was offered that, and he said, okay, well, Democrats ain't really giving me anything. They've been trying to keep me off. Media's been a part of that. He named names, and I'm thinking, whoa, okay. He's saying everything in front of the media, on the mainstream media, and on streaming, but calling out literally mainstream media and saying how he didn't really get a fair chance to get himself out there in mainstream media, and also didn't get a chance to get out there politically through his party, from the Democrats stopping him to being on states and ballots, to the Democrats not even officially counting his petitions. And I can tell you from me running for office, there's no coincidences. There's always conspiracies and conspiracies. I can tell you that. There's always backroom deals. I can tell you that. Because I say, if you treat me, and I'm out there with people, and you treat me in some way, then you're going to treat the people some way. When he was talking about people being in the cold, I have gotten petitions, signatures signed, Thanksgiving, New Year's Day, Super Bowl Day, Christmas Day, 14-degree weather, under 0-degree weather. And most of those I got on my own. Why was I committed? Because I always felt as a politician, you can make so much a difference. And if people see you out there in the grind, in the snow, in the rain, in the sleet, in the hell, then they know that you're going to be there for them. How many people run unopposed across the country? I'm against people being unopposed. A lot of people think, oh, it's too much work to be a politician. So if somebody is trying to be a public service servant, I don't like that, then give them credit. You may not have the experience, but people see that drive. You can kind of learn if you're that kind of person. You don't have to have years of experience to run for office. How many people get in office? You have AOC. Once she got in, though, she kind of changed. She became establishment. But again, I say, if you don't like who's in office, then you run or get somebody else to run. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he was jamming when he was talking about the media. He was jamming when he was saying, keeping it real, how Kamala Harris got nominated. Whether you like her or not, the people really didn't nominate her. The delegates did, but the people didn't. He lost people, I think, when he got off of that and then started talking about the healthy stuff. But I guess for that long time he was doing that, he was trying to explain his passion for what he feels. So he's pretty much saying, I'm 70 now. He said he got about 10 more good years left, maybe. As far as doing things, I guess, and to each his own as far as their age. But he's saying that Kamala would not probably give me an opportunity to do part of my dream, where if I give my endorsement to Donald Trump and I'm going by his word and I'm putting out there to the media that if I give my word to him that I'm going to endorse him, that he will give me a platform to make a difference and get the destiny that I'm supposed to get in my life. So if you were up to that too, if you had a chance to make a difference in your life, you can't maybe do it all on your own, but you have to give something in to get something out, would you do it? He said he prayed about it. He said some of his family members were, kind of upset. But when you know what you know, and even me sometimes with things that I do, I take hits for some of the things I do helping people. But if I know at the end of the day that I'm making a big difference in their life and I'm doing the job that God has given me to do, then I'm okay. So what's next for RFK Jr.? Well, later on today, Trump's going to have a rally. I guess he's going to be there, RFK. So we're going to try to live stream that. And then we'll do our Midnight at the Oasis show tonight, too. So we've heard a lot from RFK. He could have just kind of stopped it right after he said, I'm suspending my presidential run, and maybe talked a little bit about what this future job, dream job would entail. But he kept on going. So we've learned everything about everything. So what are your feelings now? Do you think people are going to now side with RFK Jr. and maybe support Trump now? Because now in this Trump regime, maybe you'll know that there will be somebody in there who is really looking for the future and the health of our kids. And he even called out Kamala, that she has not put anything out on her website, that she has not talked to the media, and that the American people are supposed to elect her. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So can't wait to see what Donald Trump talks about today. We're going to try to live stream it to you too. And that's it for now. So we'll talk again in a couple of hours. Hit the like button, subscribe, and tell your friends. You're watching Keeping It Honest with yours truly, Anthony Parker Alexander. Keep your head up, never look down, and always believe in yourself. God bless.